This is Into Sports. I'm Evan.
I'm Spencer.
And I'm Neelay.
And today we got Week 6 Fantasy Football Podcast. This is the first Fantasy Football podcast of the Into Sports. But we're going to go through our deep plays of the week, our scary starts. Guys that might be in your lineup, but you should be scared of starting. So stay tuned for that. Locked and loaded starts. We're going to go through fan questions like what do you consider when starting a wide receiver over another, and what player could be a bust in the second half of the year. That's critical. Let's start with a deep play of the week. I'm going to go with Adrian Peterson versus Miami. We know he's the Redskins running back. They have a new head coach, interim head coach, in Bill Callahan, who is the offensive line coach. And he said he wants to establish the run. But I don't normally want to start Adrian Peterson. So why is he a deep play this week? They play the Dolphins. The Dolphins have been terrible against every position, including running back. They've given up about 13 more points than average to the running back position. Adrian Peterson is going to get a lot of work. They could be winning in this game, which would be a miracle for them. So he should continue to grind it out. I expect 15 to 18 carries for Peterson and a touchdown.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I actually am very confident that Redskins will win this week, and I think one of the main ways that they'll do this is by running with Peterson.
All right. My deep play of the week is Deontay Johnson. Now, Deontay Johnson is facing a Chargers defense with a banged-up secondary. And with James Washington likely out, last game he had 92% of the snap count with Washington out. So I expect to see more of that. And
Washington will be out again.
Yeah, he will. And he also got more targets than Juju Smith-Schuster. So I think he will be a big part of the Steelers' offense this week.
And let me clarify, by the deep play, you're hearing Adrian Peterson, Deontay Johnson, guys that you haven't been wanting to start this year in fantasy football. Deep play means if you have an injury, if you have a bye week, if you're desperate. These are the guys you're going to put in your lineup. But these are guys that are going to potentially give you 8 to 10 points minimum.
Especially if you're in a 10 to 12 team league or somewhere in that range, that it's not easy to just find a guy that you can stick right in and fill someone.
Absolutely. So Spencer, why don't you give yours? Because I like Neelay's.
So mine this week is Keyshawn Johnson, wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals. But they're playing the Falcons this week, and obviously we've seen that the Falcons have really struggled, and it just seems like it's going to be a downhill path for them. And Christian Kirk, unlikely to play this week, which will greatly increase Keyshawn Johnson's target share. Along with that, expect Christian Kirk's absence to lead to a increase in his snap share, which was 70% before this week, 67th among wide receivers, and I expect that to greatly increase. And we have seen that the Cardinals are not afraid to pass the ball, as they have had 44.4 pass plays a game over the first 5 weeks, which is 4th in the league. So expect Keyshawn Johnson to have a big game, and if you need someone for a flex position or wide receiver too, he could be there for you.
He's going to be out there running routes. Arizona likes to throw the football in a positive matchup against Atlanta. I like it a lot. All right. Okay, let's deep plays a week. Adrian Peterson, Keyshawn Johnson, Deontay Johnson. Now to the scary start. Okay, like I said before, these are guys that have been playing well. These are guys that are probably in your lineup right now. But also, these are guys that you should have a little bit of hesitancy of playing this week. Neelay, why don't you kick it off?
I'm going to kick it off with Todd Gurley. And people might be saying, Neelay, Todd Gurley, his snaps count has been increasing. The offensive linemen are very good in LA. But I'm going to say that with the 49ers defense not giving up any big plays, Todd Gurley will not have a big game this week.
So, is he a running back 2 for you this week? Is he more of a flex? Are you just benching him in general?
I think he's not where he's not an RB2. I think he's a flex.
Running back 3 flex?
Yeah.
Well, okay. All right. Yep, San Francisco has been really resilient to the run. Nick Chubb, I know he had like 86 yards about there. Only 10 fantasy points. And I'm going to go DJ Chark. Wide receiver 5 on the season, been lighting the world on fire, 6'3", 4.34, has Gardner Minshew throwing him the football. a lot of touchdowns, but 1 touchdown per game on average. But he's going to be shadowed by Marshawn Lattimore. And if this was 3 weeks ago, I'd be like, start your DJ Chark. But listen, Marshawn Lattimore shadowed Mike Evans, one of the best wide receivers in football last week. 3 targets, 0 receptions. That's called laying an egg. Versus Amari Cooper, 4 receptions, 39 yards. And that's fine for fantasy. Okay, 8 points. But remember, Amari Cooper's elite, so that's not good for him. And Amari Cooper just had about 200 yards against the Packers last week. He also broke up 2 passes and drew an offensive pass interference against Cooper. Marshawn Lattimore has been shutting down the best of the best. And that's why I'm scared of DJ Chark. Now, DJ Chark could always still have a 50-yard bomb touchdown. But what I'm saying with this scary start is that the range of outcomes, I could see DJ Chark scoring 0 points. I could see him scoring 26 points. And that's what's scary about DJ Chark for me this week.
I would 100% agree. But this week, I have somebody who's a little more, has less upside, and that's Jordan Howard. I really don't see him scoring more than 10 fantasy points this week with a very bad matchup with the Vikings. And over the last couple of games, he's had a 50-50 share with Miles Sanders, and I expect that to continue. The Vikings defense has allowed only 3.7 rush yards per carry, which is extremely low. And Jordan Howard's snap count of 30% is ranked 52nd in the NFL for running backs. And his opportunity share is 40%, which is 37th in the league for running backs. His lower usage and the solid Vikings defense should definitely be trouble for Jordan Howard in this week. So definitely, as there's more solid options, he is one of the biggest sit-ums for me this week.
Yeah, Jordan Howard has scored a lot of touchdowns this season. But his expected touchdown, which is like some ridiculous stat that I have no idea how to calculate, but it's a stat, shows that he should be scoring a lot less touchdowns than he has in a bad matchup, in a game where they're not going to be winning. They might be winning, but they're not going to be blowing out the opponent like they did the Jets and running the ball to drain the clock. We won't see a great game out of Jordan Howard. I completely agree with that scary start. I would sit him this week.
Okay, moving on to start of the week. My locked and loaded start is Mohamed Sanu this week. And he is my pick because even though Matt Ryan hasn't been leading the Falcons to wins, he has been very excellent in his passing yard stats.
A lot of points, a lot of yards. Also some interceptions, but touchdowns.
Yeah, pretty much expected from Matt Ryan. And as Mohamed Sanu is the wide receiver 3 of the Falcons, he is going up against a Cardinal secondary without Patrick Peterson, and I think he will have a big game this week.
It's a good matchup. It's going to be a lot of points once again. They might even have to be playing catch-up ball. I mean, I don't know with the Atlanta Falcons right now how that defense is playing. And Mohamed Sanu has been very good for fantasy in 4 of the first 5 weeks. Week 1, 5 for 57. Okay, week 2, that's where you don't play him, 5 fantasy points. But then 6 for 75, that's a playable wide receiver 3. 9 for 91, that's a lot of yards, targets, and receptions. And then last week, 5 for 42 and 1. So he's definitely a safe wide receiver 3. And this is really what he's been for the last few years. But now he has a great matchup. I like Mohamed Sanu as a locked and loaded start. Mine is Terry McLaurin. I'm going to keep going, banging the drum on the Washington Redskins fantasy options this week. It feels bad. It does. But they play the Dolphins. I already said. Terry McLaurin has been extremely good for fantasy in every week but one. And that was the week he did not play in the game. Last week, he had, 45, 50 yards, shadowed by Stephon Gilmore against the Patriots. You can't get a tougher matchup than that. Now he sees the easiest matchup. He goes from extremely difficult to extremely easy. The Redskins should score some points even though it's on the road. And Case Keenum is going to start a quarterback. He's a guy who's been throwing the football a lot to Terry McLaurin. He's a locked and loaded start for me this week. Wide receiver 2. Starting. And he should not be on your waiver wire. Same with DJ Chark.
All right. So my locked and loaded start for this week is Mark Ingram. And I definitely think that Mark Ingram this week is a solid RB1. As the Ravens, as we all know, their run game is extremely extremely prolific they have the second most run percentage in the league, 36 run plays per game. And at the start of the season, we expected Mark Ingram to have his touches spread out more between Justice Hill, Gus Edwards, and Kenneth Dixon. But we know that Kenneth Dixon got injured, and we really haven't seen as much of Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. But what we have seen is tremendous games from Mark Ingram. And I definitely expect that to continue while they play the Bengals this week. A super juicy matchup, as they are one of the worst run defenses in the league this year. And another thing is to definitely expect Mark Ingram to get in the end zone, as he's number 2 in goal line touches and number 4 in total touchdowns. So definitely this week, expect Mark Ingram to run through the Bengals defense and get you a lot of fantasy points.
Yeah, and you look at who the Bengals have played over the last 2 weeks. Cardinals and Steelers. Against Steelers on Monday Night Football, James Conner and Jalen Samuels both had excellent fantasy games. That's 2 excellent fantasy games in one backfield.
With David Johnson and Chase Edmonds against the Cardinals.
Yeah, both of them had 15-plus points. I mean, you start any running back you can against the Cincinnati Bengals. I love it.
Yeah, the Cincinnati Bengals and the Miami Dolphins, horrible defenses that make them a gold mine for fantasy options.
We've been digging up that gold mine. Adrian Peterson, Terry McLaurin, Mark Ingram, start them this week. Okay, now we're going to go to the fan questions. And how I get these fan questions? Instagram, at the Into Sports Podcast. Okay, that's the only selling out I'm going to do today. But Chris says, what things do you consider when starting one wide receiver over another? And I'm going to answer that right now. I look at the first thing is the matchup. If I'm playing the Patriots and I'm playing a number 1 receiver and Stephon Gilmore is going to shadow him, I don't want to play him as much as I do a different option. I want to find a different option. But if he's playing the Bengals and we are the Dolphins and we establish we want to start everybody against those 2 teams, fantasy goldmine, then I'd most likely lean that way. The other thing is, I'm not going to chase the points. I'm going to chase the targets. Because let's say you have 2 receptions, 42 yards and a touchdown on 3 targets. You only had 3 targets. You had a great game. But I like guys that are going to catch the football a lot, that they're going to get thrown the football a lot, because the targets reflect the fantasy scoring. You want guys that are getting targeted often with a high target share, like DeAndre Hopkins or Julio Jones. Those guys all get a ton of targets. But like that's what makes, like, let's say a DK Metcalf, that's what makes him a little bit more scary to start than a guy like a Tyler Lockett, who in that same offense is going to get more targets. And the third thing I look at is the upside. Because with wide receivers, when you're deciding between 2 options, a lot of times there's a safe play and there's a ceiling a guy that can score 30 points on a given week. And right now, like, if I'm deciding between DJ Chark and, let's say, I don't know, another wide receiver in that range, I say DJ Chark, there's a wide range of outcomes because, like I said, with the matchup with Lattimore, but also he's very capable of catching a deep touchdown. So if I'm losing if I'm like projected to lose in that matchup, I'm probably going to start the guy who has the bigger boom potential, the potential to catch a 40-yard touchdown. But if I'm 20-point favorites going into the week, I'm probably going to start the safer guy, the guy who's getting the more targets, maybe not scoring, maybe is in a deep threat over the top. That's the few things I look for.
And also to add on, obviously the quarterback matters a lot.
Yes, but the quarterback's kind of melted in with the receiver's value. But yeah, you have to look at the quarterback. Like, I don't want Devlin Hodges throwing Juju Smith-Schuster the football. I'd rather play like a Terry McLaurin over a Juju this week. And our other fan question comes in from Criddle. Okay? What player could be a bust in the late part of the year?
Okay, so my bust is Odell Beckham Jr. And he is my bust because he has a struggling Baker Mayfield as his quarterback, and
it's not looked good at all.
Yeah,
29 passer rating.
Odell has a higher passer rating than Baker Mayfield through week 5.
And I think part of it is because his pass protection isn't holding up. They've given up like 18 sacks.
Pitiful offensive line play.
Yeah, and Also, Jarvis Landry has a nearly equivalent target share to OBJ, and he's taking up a lot of those targets that OBJ could have gotten. And another thing is that Nick Chubb is relied on to make big plays instead of Baker Mayfield because of that pass protection.
So I have a question for you, Neelay.
Yes.
Even though Odell Beckham has stunk thus far, and he won me a matchup because he fumbled, so I won the game by 1. Thank you, Michael. So, would you be looking to acquire Odell Beckham on the cheap as a buy low candidate?
No, I would not because of all the reasons I stated earlier.
Now, for me, Odell, I still, my expectations are definitely a lot different from the beginning of the season. But if an owner's 1-4 and they're freaking out and they say, I got to make a move, Odell hasn't been doing it, I would consider buying Odell Beckham for a very reduced price, buying him for pennies on the dollar. But if I'm playing market value, if I have to give up like Mike Evans, no.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're giving up like some DJ Chark type of player, then maybe I would consider it.
Yeah, I bet there have been trades offered. DJ Chark for Odell Beckham Jr., the way it started. And in the offseason, if you would have told me that, I would have said, you're crazy. So, the player I'm going to say could be a bust, because we're going to take big-time names and we're going to tear them down right now. And I'm not saying that don't start this player, don't have this player on your team, trade them away instantly, but I'm going with Brandon Cooks. He had a concussion last week. And the Rams have been finding a different formula with what they want to do. They want to run less 3 wide receiver sets, which is 11 personnel, 1 running back, 1 tight end. And now they're going to 21 personnel with 2 tight ends, Tyler Higbee, Gerald Everett. And when Gerald Everett comes on the field to run passing routes, Brandon Cooks is leaving the field. And that's been more of a trend with Sean McVay recently, going 21 personnel, running play action off it. And also, this offense isn't as good as it was last year. Not as explosive. Doesn't have that pop. And for Jared Goff to sustain 3 high-end fantasy wide receivers, that's very difficult. I mean, we have to have a fantasy goldmine for the Rams for that to even be possible. And right now, it hasn't shook up that way. The concussion, the new style of offense from McVay, and the fact that the offense hasn't been performing up to snuff. Brandon Cooks is my potential bust for late in the year.
Okay, so my potential bust for the rest of the year, and I think this one is one that we all agree upon, is Sammy Watkins. And after his lightning performance in week 1, we all thought, oh, Sammy Watkins could be a big sleeper this year, and he could have, completely light the league on fire. But he's completely cooled off, and over the last 4 weeks has averaged about 3 fantasy points per game, which isn't even good enough for a wide receiver 3. So I think we have seen the emergence of Mecole Hardman, Demarcus Robinson, Byron Pringle, to the point where Sammy Watkins is not the deep target for Patrick Mahomes anymore. And that is a lot of what Sammy Watkins and the Chiefs offense relies on. So obviously you have Travis Kelce, who will get a lot of targets no matter what. But because of these 3 wide receivers, over the last couple of weeks, Sammy Watkins has not gotten the same share of targets we all thought he would get after Tyreek Hill went out. And now Tyreek Hill is coming back. So expect even less production from Sammy Watkins as the season continues. And I really don't think, if he's on your team, then consider it not good.
If you have Sammy Watkins, think about this.
That's me, by the way. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, you have him.
Yeah, I do.
LaShawn McCoy, Damian Williams, Mecole Hardman, Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins, Patrick Mahomes. That's a lot of names. And those are a lot of names that are counted on in fantasy football. And for all of those guys to have fantasy value, first of all, that's nearly impossible. But second of all, this has to be a ridiculous offense. And right now, Patrick Mahomes is on pace for 35 touchdowns, not 50 touchdowns. There's regression from that standpoint. Watkins has an injury history and he's right now injured with a hamstring. I don't expect him to play against the Texans this week, and plenty of times he's been cleared to play with an injury. First drive, gets injured, leaves the game. That kills your fantasy team. That's called a goose, a 0-point week, and you want to avoid that at all costs.
That's exactly right.
And of course, Tyreek Hill is gonna come back soon. So
And eat up a lot of those targets for all of those receivers.
Yes, there's just not enough football to go around. Too many cooks in the kitchen for Kansas City.
There's only one ball.
Yes, there's only one football, and that's what we're seeing with the Cleveland Browns. Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, David Njoku when healthy, Nick Chubb, then Kareem Hunt. There's not enough football. But I tell you where there is a lot of football. On the Into Sports podcast. Subscribe on YouTube. This has been everything for today. Week 6 Fantasy Football Podcast. Write it in the comments if you like the Fantasy Football Podcast, or if you like the normal podcast better, or if you didn't learn anything today, or if this was very dumb. Please say that. And leave a dislike if you like.
all right, thank you for having us, Evan.
Thank you
Thank
guys
you.
for coming on. I'm Evan,
I'm Neelay.
I'm Spencer.
and we're out. Peace.